Welcome to Costly Conversations. I'm super excited because we have Sean from Pew Pew Tactical with us today. What's going on, Sean?
Hey, man, I'm so happy to be here.
Hey, well, we're super excited to have you. I'm sure everybody knows who Pew Pew Tactical is or what it is. If they haven't read an article, they've watched a video. If they haven't watched a video, I'm sure they saw you guys on Instagram or something like that. And you guys are up to some fun stuff. We were just talking beforehand, and you were showing me some of the cool stuff you guys are working on. So if you are on the audio version of this, definitely hop over to YouTube and watch what we're about to show you. This is going to be kind of cool. So, Sean, first of all, let's get into this, because if people have been watching Pew Pew Tactical for a while, they've seen an array of faces. If it's not Johnny B, it's the guy with the beard. I could never remember his name, but you're also a guy with the beard. Who's the other guy who had been doing a lot of the videos for Pew Pew Tactical?
Yeah, so we have a varied crew at Pew Pew Tactical, and we have a run of names. It's kind of funny. We have Johnny B, like you mentioned. The guy with the beard is John. And Sean also means John, coming from the Gaelic. So we have a lot of repetitive names that seem to occur at Pew Pew Tactical.
John and John.
Yeah. So right now, Johnny B is still making some content for us. And I am kind of taking over a lot of the video, the front-facing stuff, because Pew Pew Tactical recently moved. It originated out in California. Mm-hmm. And as you might imagine, kind of difficult to get some of the fun things to test and write and create content with. So the decision was made by Eric and Paula to bring the whole organization out to Austin, Texas. Now, we still have folks that create freelance content for us, quite a few of talented folks, actually, who are all over the nation. But the main operation is located in Texas now. So that's why you've seen a few different faces change up recently.
And I guess the elephant in the room is people do get attached to their personalities. You know, we build up a little bit of cult personality. We're like, okay, who is Pew Pew Tactical? Is it John? Is it Johnny B? Is it Sean? John? Like, who is it?
Yeah.
But let's talk about that.
So that's a great approach. We like to think of ourselves as having broad appeal to a wider array of folks, right? I don't have a Southern accent, and I can make one up, but I don't have that, right? And I don't have the giant beard that John did. So we have different appeals, different levels to a wider array of folks. But I think right now, just based upon the move itself, I was willing to relocate to from Colorado to Texas. So I'm the guy right now. Johnny B is also going to continue to contribute. And just today, we have a great guy named Joshua, who is a heck of a competitor with tactical games and competitive shooting, stuff like that. He just made his debut video reviewing the CZ PS2, and that's a hoot, man. It was fun putting that together with him. So, awesome. You know, we mix it up a little bit.
No, that's good.
I'll be bringing the bulk of the video content for the foreseeable future, but we definitely are going to have other people contributing to the overall products.
And I think that's really cool, and I can appreciate that Pew Pew Tactical is bigger than just one guy. It's not the Armed Atlas show. If you guys follow my firearms YouTube channel / page versus the podcasting stuff, and
right,
you know, it is interesting where it's like it's almost like a publication / YouTube experience / blog. You know, it's like, what is to you? What is Pew Pew Tactical?
So Pew Pew Tactical is the brainchild of Eric Hunk, who's the creator. And it's a great story because Eric came to firearms from a position that's non-traditional. he is not the guy that you would look at and assume, oh man, that guy knows a lot about guns. He and his family weren't really into firearms, so he didn't have that upbringing to, convey to him a lot of knowledge about firearms.
Mm-hmm.
But he got into them, and he really started digging around and learning. And having the advent of the internet around, he was able to learn things and dig up information, find resources, what ammunition goes with what gun, and what's the best concealed carry option out there, and what are the laws in your state. So he noticed that people started going to him for that information, and he had the idea. He was like, oh man, I could create a website, I could create a blog and provide this information to people who don't necessarily know even as much as I do, because he recognized that everyone has their journey and everyone starts at a different place. And one of the things that I'm sorry to say that we don't do so well in the firearms community is we're not overly accepting of people who don't necessarily know everything when they come into it. So
Right.
I know I've had this experience, and I've heard it repeated several times from other folks. You go in and you get the gun counter commando who knows so much more than you, and they're going to look down on you and tell you exactly what you need, and maybe do it a little disdainfully because you don't know everything that you need to know. And we despise that approach. We think that's counterproductive, and we recognize that there's going to be people who know a lot more than us at Pew Pew Tactical, but there's going to be a lot of people that don't know nearly as much, and there's going to be people who are right in the middle too. And we try to be a service by providing information to them about firearms, and a wide array of information, anything from gun reviews to complete guides, how to buy, laws, considerations on concealed carry, defensive practices, all of that kind of stuff. The whole gamut.
That is awesome, especially you consider like, hey, there's a lot of people, especially in recent years, post 2020, we had the boom. And I noticed on this side is, okay, who's people who are buying guns? People who generally are not stereotypically known to buy guns. We have women, we have black folks, and those are two audiences that I don't necessarily speak to them both, but I know a lot of women. I have daughters, and they have babysitters and aunts and whatnot, and they're always asking me about firearms, and I can't teach them everything.
Yeah.
So it's great that they have new resources and continuing to expand in those resources. And and we'll get into some of the more user-friendly, transparent ways to look into buying firearms that you guys are kind of breaking ground on in a way that's probably revolutionary for this business, but not revolutionary in the sense that it's never been done. So I'm glad to see that we're taking good ideas from other sectors and bringing it in. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I definitely want to just say thank you to you, and of course John and Johnny B and all the guys at Pew Pew Tactical, and of course the guys who originated it, because I look up to you guys in many ways. Specifically when I first started to get into the firearms content game, I was like, wow, they do it really well. Like their videos are crisp. The attention to detail is amazing. And even, the first video I saw you on was the Staccato P, and you went into your law enforcement background a little bit. And of course, the obligatory 2 world wars joke, because 2011, 1911. And I was like, man, this is the way a review should be. And
thank you.
I'm super excited that more people will be able to go find those old videos and the new ones and the ones that you have yet to even think of, and get quality information that's not pretentious, that's not exclusionary in the sense that you don't have to know everything about a gun to have a conversation with or to interact with this content. And even I remember John was doing some like bolt action or long range gun out in the desert, and he basically said like, hey, most of my experience is on, I believe he said Glocks and, striker fired handguns. So he's not going to be the most,
Right. Right.
articulate / he's not going to have all the juice when it comes to that, but he's going to try, and he's going to get some information to really, relay. And I appreciated that transparency. Because I'm sure at some point in my life, back in the day when I thought, you can't show weakness, I might have been like, yeah, and just kind of put on a little bit more than I needed to, and I think that almost gave me permission to have gaps. Not that I'm not pursuing, but like, hey, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to pretend to be accepted in the 2A community.
And the funny thing about that, and thank you very much for the compliment. So we appreciate it. And I will happily explain to you at least why the video is such quality here in just a minute. But let me address something real quickly. We all come from different places, and we enter into this firearms world from different backgrounds. And we don't presume to know it all. That's why the name is Pew Pew Tactical. We're not the resource for the snake eaters of the world, right? The SEAL Team 6 is not coming to our website and figuring out just exactly how they need to proceed. It's tongue in cheek. We don't take ourselves too seriously, but we do recognize that we have somewhat of a responsibility to provide valid information to people. And at least a little bit of transparency comes along with that. And so to address your point, I have a lot of background in pistols just because of my 22 and a half years in law enforcement. I have a little bit with rifles because I was on a local SWAT team, but my long range and my scoped rifle stuff, I never had that assignment. So that is still very green for me. I'm still learning. Well, if I'm honest, I'm still learning about all of it. And the minute I think that I've accomplished something, I still find that I have the capacity to learn even more. But I'm the furthest along with pistols, still learning about shotguns, still learning about rifles, long range. But yeah, I mean, that's part of that authenticity, I think, that we bring because we're not necessarily the absolute experts on everything, but we can share our experience in a cogent way, hopefully, and do so especially with the talents of, I'm going to mention my brother, Johnny Fantastic. Now, Johnny came out from LA, from California, and he is our videographer, and oh my gosh, the guy is talented. He makes me look like I have some idea of what I'm doing instead of being a bumbling buffoon out there. And he puts together the video. It is top notch. So he was a great addition to the team, and we're really lucky to have it.
Did you say that your videographer's name is John also?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you that there's a theme here. So now
they look at the applications. If your name's not John, we're throwing it out.
Yeah, you're out. Right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's funny. No, that's awesome. And I love that you touched on the fact that, PewPew Tactical, kind of tongue in cheek in a sense. I mean, even the logo, it's a Jetsons era, space blaster. It's not some tricked out 2011 AR with the, just kitted out. It's, it's fun. Yeah. And there's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn. And I appreciate, when I was, I guess, trying to figure out, okay, what kind of receiver do I want? I'm doing an AR build. I looked at y'all's website and I was like, okay, cool. This is the difference between the billet and the fortune. And it's like, wow, there's information there. I guess if you looked up to me thinking I know about these things, I'm sorry I disappointed y'all, but I'm learning, and I appreciate that there are resources out there. But definitely, it's really good, and I appreciate great video. That's why I love Corleone Noir. He puts together great content.
Love his stuff.
But you also, if you look closely and you look through the years, you see the progression and the way he does things, and behind every great YouTube channel / personality, you get a good videographer, and
Oh,
if you
yeah.
are familiar, the guy who does most of his video, Peter, he's amazing.
Hmm.
He is
Hmm.
like top notch. So I love to see like, okay, we got Peter. He's doing crazy video, and he does more than just gun stuff. He does
Sure.
comedians and shows and stuff. And
Hmm.
then we have, Johnny Fantastic. I don't know his real name, but old John. John to the fourth power or something like that.
Yeah.
John Squared.
Yeah.
We got John Squared over here, and
Yeah.
he's killing it and making y'all look amazing, and
Right.
just slow mo, and just how really nicely
Hmm.
composed each of the shots are. And I'm sure he gives you tips if you have to do something yourself. But
Oh yeah,
that's
for
just
sure. It's been a funny progression for me, kind of switching careers. Now I had written freelance in the gun industry since about 2014,
mhm.
and my photography sucked. I mean, that was something that I've had to grow and learn. And then just before I came on board full time with Pew Pew, I was doing some video stuff for AR15.com.
Okay, yeah,
And I learned how to set up my own shots and record, and then some light editing. And oh man, I had quite a learning curve when I was learning how to write and then put together decent photos, because that was not easy. But video is so much more difficult, and there's so many more complexities involved. And to try to come up with a product that's going to be valuable to
mhm.
a wide audience, that's a challenge. And now with Johnny here, I don't have to worry about that so much.
Right. It just takes it right off your plate.
Yeah, man. He shoots it, he cuts it, he puts it together, and yeah, his edits are awesome. So
Yeah, no. Shout out to him. Definitely sending air high fives, doing great work, doing the Lord's work over here, making
there
sure
he
everybody knows
is.
the good news of
Yeah,
the Second Amendment, and the stuff that kind of goes into it. Because we could say my
right.
rights all day, but if you don't know how to even pick out a decent gun, we're in trouble. And
Yeah,
speaking of that, let's jump into kind of the next phase of Pew Pew Tactical, the phase 4, if you will, of for my Marvel fans out there,
yeah.
of Pew Pew, and kind of what you guys are doing to push the industry forward a little bit. And I'll start it off like this: if you ever watch a gun video on the internet or any sort of product video, there's the comment section is strong and sometimes aggressive. And it comes with the territory, but then again, it can get a little out of hand. I'm sure you've seen. We have a specific name for product guys who they'll get a gun in, they get to review it, they talk about it, and if you say too many nice things about a gun, especially a gun that maybe someone has an opinion about that isn't as
Right.
favorable, you will get called a shill,
Yeah,
or I'm sure there's a few other names, some names that I don't want to say on my podcast.
yeah.
And so there's a level of, I suppose we need to do a little bit more to help these people along. Some people you can't please, like you just can't.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys are doing something kind of interesting where it's like, okay, don't take our word for it. Look at these audience metrics. What are we doing in regards to that? What are you guys calling it? Like, how are you pushing the conversation forward when it comes to trustworthy firearms content slash recommendations?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm happy to acknowledge the shill comment, because it seems like I've dealt with that a few times since kind of coming to the fore with Pew Pew. There have been a couple of guns that have just been outstanding. Staccato was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But, if people just put their hands on it and shoot it, I think 99 out of 100 are going to agree. Holy crap, that's a great gun.
Right.
But when you have the cynicism in the consumer market that we have right now, and man, I get it. We really have to be critical consumers of media. And we have that as a responsibility to ourselves, because right now there's such a cognitive dissonance in society, and we tend to look for that confirmation bias, right? We form our opinion and then we go out and seek sources to kind of reaffirm that. And so a very, very small percentage of comments for our videos and articles will come in and occasionally say something along those lines. But to kind of aid with that, not necessarily combat it, but to kind of aid with that, we have come up with an idea, and we're currently developing it. It's in place, and we're getting ready to go live with it soon, probably next month, but it's called the Pew Pew meter. And if you wanted the shortcut explanation for it, it's basically the thermometer for rotten tomatoes. Yeah. And it's for guns. So people can come to the website, they can search through, find a Taurus GX4, find a Glock 44, and they can go in, click on it, and they can see that the number of ratings on it are whatever they are. Like currently we're sitting at 3.8 overall. But they can click into that, and they can also see that we rate each of the guns by a few different categories, like accuracy, reliability, customization, ergonomics, price, and overall. And interestingly, these are the same metrics that we rate the guns in our reviews that we put on the actual website. But the difference here is you can go in and you can actually put your own rating down for these guns. And our hope is to crowdsource all of this, like take the collective information, the experiences that people have had with all of these different guns, and come to the website, log in, create an account, but then go in and rate the guns that you've had experience with. And you know what? I think most of the people that know me, like really know me, consider me a trustworthy person. But let's say you don't trust anyone. Fine, I understand that. But you trust your own experience, so you can go in and rate the guns that you've had practical exercises with and have spent years shooting, and you can rate them yourself and help put that into the pool of knowledge that we have out there in the world right now with people who have had experience with all these different guns.
I think this is definitely a feature slash, I'll call it a product that you guys are putting out into the world that I think will definitely help, especially people who maybe they're budget conscious, like a price conscious. And where I live in the 2A community, where I don't have all the money in the world to just go buy whatever gun I want.
Sure.
I just don't. I'm not there yet. If y'all want to help out with that, join the Patreon or buy one of the shirts. Constant Freedom shirts. These are amazing. They premium materials. Go get you one. That said, I understand what it means to be budget conscious in the sense that you don't want to just go buy, the new SIG X Macro came out. Amazing gun. Everybody loves it. XYZ, SIG has dropped it in everybody's hands. I'm not even sure who bought it on day one or who had it under embargo, because everybody's reviews are dropping tonight. Like it's hot cakes out here.
Yep.
And everybody likes it. Well, everybody says they like it. And, it's like, okay, well, SIG clearly sent it out to a few people, or invited somebody out to their experience place and let people get some time with it. Can we trust that? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Now, we also have, Staccato, if they change the grips on their gun, like, can I afford to go out and try every single gun and put 1,000 rounds through every single gun? Or even 100 rounds through every single. No, I can't do that. I'm sorry, guys. It's not practical. So I love the fact that you're like, okay, hey, maybe you have questions. This is what real people are saying about this gun. Like we like it, but maybe you'd like some additional data.
Mm-hmm.
My only question, and maybe you can't answer this right now, we can follow up and answer it, is what are the criteria for entering in a rating, if there are any? And also, and that's one question. And the second question would be, what are you doing to prevent, let's say, review bombing? Because that is a big deal in any sort of online
Sure.
rating system.
Yeah, I think those are some of the issues that we're going to have to address.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, man, it's just like comments. When we put out 13, 14 videos, or 13 to 14 articles a week. Sometimes we have usually a video that comes out on YouTube every week. We have multiple vertical videos that come out on the various social media platforms, and that generates a lot of conversation. 99% of that is valid. It's moving the ideas forward, right? It's generating some kind of engagement and conversation. But every once in a while, there's some slick folks that get in and just say some absolute horrible stuff, and I'm blown away.
Yeah,
we have to keep track of that. We have to jump in and monitor that and take care of it. So unfortunately, there are going to be those rare events that happen, and we'll address those when they come up. I'm sure they're going to happen, but I think they're not going to be the majority. If somebody goes in, and listen, man, this is a valid experience. If someone goes in and they absolutely bomb a gun, but they have valid points that they can articulate in their explanation of why they're giving it such a negative rating, hey, I think that's part of an experience. You have a manufactured product, especially something that essentially channels an explosion and sends a product downrange at a high velocity. There are going to be issues. QC is extremely important in this industry, but there are always going to be those exceptions. Thankfully, they're rare, but people do have experiences, and that's valid. I think they're going to be on the overall curve. They're going to be in the minority, but they're important, and some people are going to identify with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it will definitely. You will have those comments. Shoot, I had an interesting comment the other day. I did a review on a Hellcat a few weeks ago, and for some reason that's the video that's doing well.
Okay.
I don't get it. Anyway, and somebody was like, I had made a comment about shooting 100 yards with the gun. I was like, I don't know if you want to do that. It's not really for that. And they're like, that's just stupid. Why would you even comment? No, no one shoots 100 yards with a handgun. I'm like, am I? No. And then I was like, okay, no. I actually know some guys who have done it. It's not normal. I wouldn't recommend it. But if for some reason you wanted to shoot, the spirit of what I was saying is, if you want to shoot something real far, get a rifle or get a handgun that's capable,
Yeah.
Because, if you want to take a staccato P or something a little bigger, it's known for its accuracy.
Yeah.
It's more capable. You may actually pull it off if you have the skill.
Yeah.
But kind of getting back to it, you guys did talk. You mentioned rating guns for accuracy and in a few other places. Are you guys expecting the reviewers to write out a few sentences to kind of describe their gripes with the if they say, well, this gun's not accurate, or are they shooting low and to the left with a Glock?
Well, you may have found the Achilles heel for the whole thing here, man. We have to take that into consideration. Mechanics have a great expression for what's wrong with most vehicles. And when mechanics are sitting there talking to each other, they'll typically refer to the nut behind the wheel, right? Like if you get the nut behind the wheel out of the way, you'll probably fix most of the problems with the vehicle.
That's funny.
And that's true with firearms too. A lot of times, my gun keeps shooting low left. I don't know what's wrong with it. I've adjusted the sights. I've done this. I've done that. Yeah, that's difficult. And even, myself, I'll go out and I shoot groups and try to get a good representation of the true accuracy of a firearm. And I'm a problem. I'm a problem. And when I feel like I'm not representing the best actual accuracy of a firearm, I just keep shooting. I will. Yeah, I'll even walk away and take a break, shoot something else, come back to it, and try to make sure that I'm giving the best representation of it. Because there's an absolute magic to shooting every single time. There's a moment in time where your sights are lined up or your red dot is a certain place, and at that split second where you press the trigger and you break and the striker hits and the round comes funneling down the chamber, and it's directed exactly where your muzzle was pointed at that moment, whether you jerked the trigger or whether you anticipated or whether you had a nice clean break and you were pointed exactly where you were supposed to be. And that moment's never going to be repeated, right? That's that one split second in time that we can never get back. But overall, you have to average out the performance, and that helps you eliminate the nut behind the wheel, so to speak, and get the truth out of those results.
Wow, the nut behind the wheel. That's what we're going to call this one.
Yes.
No, that's perfect, and you're absolutely right. There is a magical moment that happens, especially if you get the draw just right, and you let off a series of 10 well-timed shots, and your cadence is good, and your muzzle control is spot on, and you look back at the video and you're like, dang, that gun shoots flat.
Yeah.
Or you just had really good recoil management.
Sure.
And then you look at the group and you're like, wow, that's a nice group. I love that group. That's a nice boulder. That's a great group. And you're like, wow, this gun is great. Or if you have a bad day and your hands are sweaty, and that's my Achilles heel is my hands sweat extraordinarily. You go out to these events and you could have the nicest gun in the world in your hands and it's just flopping around like a fish because your hands are sweaty and you didn't remember to dry them off before you touched a $300,000 gun.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, I mean, just the reality of it is you can have mixed results, and oftentimes it is the nut behind the wheel that's causing these problems. And now you're like, well, the gun's not accurate. Or myself, when the first time and the second time I shot the C2, I was like, I don't know. And I still have some gripes because I expected to shoot like the P, and I shoot the P really well, and I shoot the C2 less well. But I'm sure if I were to go back and forth and shoot the C2 and then shoot something extremely similar but maybe less expensive, I'm sure I could definitely find the joys in it, especially when you start to take it out to further distances. That's where I hear it really shines. But yeah, you know what? Next time, guys, I'll record it. I actually made a whole video talking about how I like a few guns more than I like the C2, and people had opinions about that. The fanboys were mad.
Wow. You can't please everyone.
You can't. I don't expect to.
Yeah, and what's fun for me is because I'm exposed to so many different handguns over such a short period of time, and occasionally rifles too, I tend to do an informal comparison and analysis. I recently shot the CZP-10F Comp Ready, and phenomenal. And we were on the short range, typically don't shoot out past 20, 25 yards, and just see how it performs within those short engagement distances. But the gun felt so solid that I grabbed Johnny and we walked over to the 100-yard range. And I think it was 2 or 3 shots and I was ringing steel.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's a testament to that firearm.
So are you saying you can shoot at 100 yards?
Absolutely.
Shot?
Yeah.
Take that guy in the comment section who was making me question everything I believe.
Is it a practical application? No.
You have to justify that in court, buddy.
Right. Is it useful in a defensive scenario? I certainly hope not. But yeah, it's totally within the realm of possibility. You could probably go even further. But for me, just seeing how accurate that gun was, I thought, man, I bet this thing I could stretch its legs, and it did. It performed.
That's awesome. I gotta try that. There's a lot of guns I really want to try. And
yep.
How do you balance? I guess I suppose your shooting days when you go out with the company and shoot are there's like scheduled times for that.
Yeah. So I was there for the SIG event, and with the release of the X Macro Comp, and those aren't the norm. The bulk of my time is spent with our editorial team gets together and decides, okay, we think these are the products that we want to cover. We think this is what folks are going to be interested in, what they're going to click on, what they're going to want to watch. But occasionally you'll get an invitation from a company and they'll have you come out and review a product. And like you mentioned, there's an embargo, there's a non-disclosure agreement that's signed, and you fly out to a place and you get introduced to the product on site and you have the experience with it. And in the situation with the X Macro Comp, those guys threw together a competition. We were at the SIG Academy and they were like, okay, we're having a big competition. And there wasn't a whole lot of notice about what the format was going to be. But I got to tell you, I have been to events where you show up and you get a new gun and there's a ton of ammo loaded up, right? And it's amazing. It's quite an experience. But my preference is training or competition, something that pushes you to really find the boundaries of that firearm and potentially your own boundaries and see how it's going to perform while you're under pressure. And that's when you really get to know a firearm that much better.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is you can fire 100, shots, 500 shots. If you're Aaron Cowan and you want to do the burn down on old Sage Sage Dynamics, and the man's legendary in the two-way space for breaking optics.
Sure.
Every chance he gets, which we're thankful for that, because God knows I'm not doing it.
We don't have to do it. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and one might ask, like, shoot, now what's the realism in even that? I mean, we love to see it, and it's like, okay, if the gun just can't cycle rounds, then it can't. But you start putting some sweat into the gun, you start moving around. In real life, you get some pocket lint in the gun. Is it still going to run the way it's supposed to, as advertised? Or are you going to complain it doesn't lock back on the final round? And, we all know you have big hands, so it's your fault.
I do, man. I do. And that is an absolute reality, but I always try to communicate that. I adore the Walther PDP. But that is the one drawback for me, is I don't get last round lockback because I use a very high grip and my hands are so big that I typically ride that slide release, so I don't get that last round lockback. And I mean, otherwise that gun is perfect in so many ways, but that's a reality, and you don't experience that until you get out and push it. And I was there for the PDP's release, and when we flew out to Illinois, and we did 2 days straight of training with the Walther Defense Division, and holy crap, we were doing all kinds of stuff: shooting at night, shooting with nods, shooting in the rain, shooting from different positions on the ground, speed drills. You know, they brought out the timer, like, okay, we're going to knock 1/10 of a second off from that, pick it up, move it even faster. And the gun just ran. It ate up everything that we did. Most of the time, these companies, when they bring you out and they put you under that kind of pressure tester with that new product, they're ready. They've already tested it. They're confident, and it goes well. And that's been my experience so far. Now,
right. But many companies can't do that, like, or at least won't.
You're right.
At least some of the more budget-friendly brands that they don't have the same QC. They're not advertising these guns for military law enforcement use, which, you know, obviously there's a lot of guys in the 2A space who, if the military and the law enforcement, they're not using it, I'm not using it. You know, if cops don't carry it, I'm not carrying it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's not practical for everyone now. So that there is a gap there, because there are some companies right now who are really innovating. They're really pushing to do things different, to evolve. And other companies are kind of resting on what their products already are. And it's, you've got to have a little bit of balance there, because you know, like I think of Kel-Tec. Kel-Tec is a brand that continually pushes the boundaries and tries to come up with different stuff and see what they can get out of a product. And I dig that. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
People have different opinions about Kel-Tec, and for whatever reason, what their experiences might be, but they're definitely innovators. They definitely try to take the brand in different directions.
And I think in a strong way, I very much appreciate the companies that are young and hungry and just desperate for your attention and willing to do the bold and unimaginable. I mean, even 6 Hour is technically a very new company when you consider it to the counterpart for the American market of Glock and all the, how many Glocks have we had so far? I think we're up to like 45, right?
Yes,
Something
we
like that.
are. But what have you heard lately? And that's kind of my point.
I talked to the sales team at Glock, and when we talked, I was like, hey, you know, like, when are we doing something a little different? And they were like, when Mr. Glock is ready. And I was kind of upset, because I've been a Glock guy. Like, I carried a 19 up for a long time. And I'm like, you know, 19 is cool, but we just got the MOS. Like, Canik, and people have their opinions about Canik or Yannick, but, you know, it's Canik. They have guns with double undercuts and comes with the plates, and now they have their tactical edition, which has a 90-degree polymer trigger break, and it's like, what is this? This is not normal. And some competition guys will tell you that they have the best trigger on the market for striker fire guns.
Nice.
Next to Walther. And it's, you know, $500 guns and up. And, you know, the value proposition is kind of getting a little interesting, because now you're like, okay, so the price is going up.
Right.
It's not as refined in some ways as some of the other offerings, specifically Walther, if you want to compare triggers and whatnot. But I suppose the question is like, okay, so what do we want? Do we want the innovation, or do we want this this image of perfection that we've allowed ourselves to believe in, per se, with Glock? And even I mean, we look at SIG with the 365 lines. Early on, they had issues, but it's, in my opinion, probably the most reliable and trustworthy and popular carry gun in America right now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing that people hear, like when I did the review of the X Macro Comp, it's a phenomenal gun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 100% reliable. I didn't have any issues with it. But because you're getting a 17 round magazine, that grip is slightly longer than the XL platform. And it just makes it a little bit more difficult to conceal. I am not an AIWB guy. I've never been that guy. Maybe I will down the road, but this gun is phenomenal for so many different reasons. But because it's kind of towing that boundary between a subcompact, a micro compact, and a full size, it's somewhere in there because the capacity was 17 plus 1. You got a little bit more grip that you've got to deal with. And for most folks, I think that is the area where you're going to print. That's where you're going to have that difficulty with concealment, which kind of brings up the argument of, okay, but everything is balances. There's trade-offs. And for me, like I recently tried the Spectre Comp, another great version of the P365, but the grip is kind of small. And so that makes it a little more challenging for me to get out of concealment, to get my hands on it, just based on the holster that I was using. So the X Macro Comp, definitely easier to grab from concealment and present, but harder to conceal at the same time. So
it's not a duty gun.
No. Wow. That brings up an interesting question. Could officers potentially move to a smaller gun like that? I think I wouldn't necessarily see that happening just based on my experience for uniform personnel, but I'll bet you there would be support personnel or investigative staff, maybe administrative staff, who could consider carrying a firearm like that because it has the same capacity, but it's much smaller. And I'll tell you, if you're not wearing a duty belt, a smaller gun, a lighter gun is a great option because it's not going to pull your belt down, weigh your belt down, pull your pants down. It's quite a challenge.
Absolutely. Now, that is a question of like, okay, if you aren't carrying a big old duty belt, and I've seen some cops with some janky duty belts. I saw a cop walking down the street the other day, and his gun was like leaning out, and I was like, what? Yeah. I don't, man, it hurts my heart because I'm surrounded by online and in person when I'm around these guys with the nicest battle belts from Wilder Tactical and whoever, Fair Concepts or whoever, and they have their Safari Lands and everything is on point. Every time you put your hand exactly there, the gun is there. Yeah, it's not moving, and my guy's flopping in the wind. What is happening?
Yeah, there's a spectrum, man, and I've mentioned this before, but there are the cops who are out there who are like tackleberries, and that's kind of an older reference to the movie Police Academy. There was a guy, a recruit, who was named Tackleberry, and he was all about being duty ready and having his firearm squared away, and he knew everything you could possibly know about his firearm. But there are also cops out there who aren't comfortable with firearms, don't like firearms, but it's a requirement of the job, so they have to do it. There are cops that dread qualification every month or every 2 or 3 months, whenever they have to do it. So you've got a wide spectrum out there. You're going to have the officer who is absolutely squared away, who researches and finds the better gear because maybe his department issues not so good stuff. So maybe he goes with Barrow Concepts, or maybe he picks up his own Safari Land. But then there are also the officers out there who are going to look like a soup sandwich with a rusty belt that is janky and, barely holding their gun together. That's the reality.
Yeah. And that's, I do want to touch on that because you with the remaining time that we have left,
sure,
I know you served your community as a law enforcement officer for, let's name the years while we're here.
22 and a half.
22 and a half years, which is a long time to do anything. That's like raising a whole kid and sending him to college right there.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
And so I was like, okay, we've recently had a lot of really tragic things happen. And we continue to have tough situations in the streets. And we have people assuming like cops are superhero Jesus. And it's like, well, some of these guys, they barely qualify. Like, I don't know if y'all know, but I know you've kind of been, not to even touch on political things, but you've been programmed to believe that police officers will basically be everything that you need and more. And a lot of these guys barely qualify. They might not qualify and have to retest. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm not a cop, never was, but I want to hear from you. Like, what's that like, kind of being a guy who's very familiar with firearms and to the point where you've been able to write articles and I guess the expectations for training, what training that you're given, what training other guys opt into and just maybe neglect, and just these expectations. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Man, that is like a mushroom cloud of a topic, but I'll try to thread the needle and hit some of the points that you brought up. Cops don't get enough training.
Yeah,
it's just that simple. Budgetary constraints, other agendas that are prioritized. We're doing a lot of different things with the same amount of money. The failures of law enforcement over the last few years that have been, demonstrated quite publicly across the nation, combined with the pandemic, have left a lot of people with anti-government sentiments. I don't want to be told I have to wear a mask. I don't want to be told I have to stay home. I don't want, to be told I have to get a vaccine. And unfortunately, law enforcement is, they have to pick up that check, right? They're the ones who are placed in the position of having to enforce unpopular mandates or even laws. And when we make mistakes, it's partially because we do have a lack of training, and we're put into a position that is almost impossible. I mean, it is one of the most difficult jobs that I can even comprehend in the United States today. I was lucky enough to have served in a few different roles. I was on the road for about 15 years. I worked at a sheriff's office and went from a reserve deputy all the way up to a patrol commander. And on the last several years of my career, I worked at a DA's office. So I was a prosecutorial investigator, and I worked different scenarios, working on different cases in that role. And the role that you have to fill is part counselor, part sociologist, part criminologist, part fighter, part gunfighter. You have to be a referee. You have to be so many different things, and the job takes an incredible toll. And then you're continually held to what feels like an increasingly more higher standard. But it has to be that way, because you also have an incredible amount of authority And, we have to be accountable to the public in order to accomplish that mission. So within all of that spectrum that I've outlaid, you have officers of every stripe who are going to be out there. You're going to have the ones who show up and they're motivated and they are going to seek extra training. They're going to do stuff outside of what's required. They're going to try to exceed the expectation. But you also have some, and unfortunately, there's a crisis of leadership in law enforcement a lot of times that are demotivated. They're going to do the bare minimum, if that, and maybe their training standards aren't as high. And maybe they don't have someone who is continually telling them, hey, this is what the law says, this is what the Constitution says, and this is what the recent findings from the Supreme Court have held. You have to do it this way. So they're out there doing the best they can. And, most cops, I think, are good folks. Most of the vast majority of them are. But you also get a bad rap for a few that have done some unspeakable things, undoubtedly unspeakable things. So within all of that, it's a challenge, man. It's a challenge. And it's not getting any better right now because the mandate that has come out as a result of all of the uproar against law enforcement has been back off. Law enforcement has taken a step back. And unfortunately, because I've mentioned the sociology part, in a criminal environment within a society is going to fill that gap. If there's not someone there standing there as a buffer between victims and criminals, and law enforcement steps back, then they're going to step up. And so that's why, in a large way, crime is up right now. And it's a problem. Is this what you wanted to get into?
Hey,
I've got some opinions about it, brother.
I think we've touched on it in a way that is congruent with the show, Costly Conversations. We have kept it costly in that regard, and obviously it's tough. It's really tough because you see some of the situations and people are hurt, like deeply, like on a spiritual level, hurt. And some people have anxiety when they see blue lights or even just a guy with a gun walking around. And who is that? Well, he's supposed to be here, but they still have anxiety because they've either experienced something really rough or they, sociology, some criminology, some socioeconomics, whatever your situation is, has probably influenced the way that you even see and interact with law enforcement or public figures. And me being a big freedom guy myself, I'm just like, the police can do what they want to do. However, oftentimes they are asked to enforce these mandates that may feel like an infringement on your human rights to move freely. And I don't hate anyone who carries a badge unless you've done something worth hating. And even still, but I do have a lot of empathy for people who have concerns about things that they've seen recently.
Oh yeah. No. And look, man, law enforcement has gotten it wrong.
But a lot of guys won't say that.
Yeah. Oh no. That's stupid. Hey man. Just from a human standpoint, there is no walk of, there's no job out there. There's no career where everybody gets it right. I mean, look at doctors. If you look at malpractice lawsuits, if you look at misdiagnoses, there's always evidence of having mistakes. And sometimes, unfortunately, and law enforcement is repeatedly cast in this role, our mistakes are typically spelled in blood. And sometimes that's the blood of officers, sometimes that's the blood of suspects, and sometimes that's the blood of innocent victims. It had nothing to do with the situation. And it's training, it's lawsuits, and it's findings that help law enforcement to grow and hopefully get better. But it's forever going to be a continual growing and unfortunately painful process.
Well said. And I appreciate the comparison to doctors, because I've actually had a few knee surgeries, for those of you who have been following my life. And the first one that I had, they didn't detect something that was an actual issue. And it caused me problems later on the road. And even the follow-up surgery that fixed a lot of the issues, I still had some problems, and we had to go in there another time. And it's like, man, doctors can't get it right. And I'm not trying to give any excuse. I'm not some statist. I'm not giving an excuse to every officer in the world who's ever done anything bad. Mm-hmm. But I think what the comparison that most people make, and correct me if this is wrong, is police officer to airline pilot. Even though the training is extremely different. If you've ever, I had a buddy who was going to school to be a pilot. He actually took some classes, and he realized it wasn't going to work out just because of cost. You go to university to learn how to be a pilot, unless you take several hours independently. And it's like, okay, airline pilots literally can't get it wrong, and still they do. But when they get it wrong, it's probably like 100 people die.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an enormous responsibility. And unfortunately, if you look at and I can't tell you how much training airline pilots get, but I can tell you that doctors get a heck of a lot of training. And a lot of continuing education after they get their doctors, right? So law enforcement is not that case, and it probably should be. It should be much higher, just because. And if I can offer any advice in a scenario like that, always do whatever's going to help you get through that situation alive, preferably uninjured. I know that we all have rights, and I know that oftentimes it probably feels like maybe an officer is violating your rights. But when you have someone who is potentially in a scenario where they feel like they have to use force, when an officer is out there potentially approaching the idea of using force against you in a scenario, that's not necessarily the time to say, oh, well, you're violating my rights, right? My counsel is get through that situation and win the day in court. Win the day in court. Set a standard for other people and get through it, man, because I hate to see you can be right and still regret that situation, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of been a consensus amongst level-headed individuals. I mean, many of them. You're right. But it's sad to see, because we watch video after video after dash cam after dash cam, iPhone, Android from 6 years ago, like whatever it is, however we're watching it, and then someone either gets hurt or someone is just angry, just full of piss and vinegar, and just wants to go home with a bruised ego versus like a bruised sternum. And and I'm not justifying disrespect or any sort of patronization or even a violation of anyone's rights, but get home, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's your number one obligation to get home to your children, not necessarily to get in a gunfight with somebody who has license from the state to stop a gunfight.
Yeah. And that's scary, man. It's something now that I've thought about for quite a while, because even when I became an investigator, I was no longer uniform. So were I to show up on a situation and draw my firearm and have to confront whatever scenario had occurred, I had to be concerned about, is an officer going to come up and consider me a threat?
Right.
And what are the rules of engagement there? So I get it, man. I get it. And now that I'm retired, we still carry.
Mm-hmm.
And we still think that we have those ethical obligations, certainly moral obligations, to prevent the loss of life. And that's something we all have to deal with,
Yeah.
thinking about that as a
Yeah.
response.
I've actually recently, I think there was somebody did a video and they were talking about the unfortunate scenario where if you come upon a situation and you feel like you can save the day per se, and you want to do some hero stuff, you might die like a hero. And that is a big risk that you end up assuming. And if you don't want to be that guy, don't be that guy. But at the end of the day, anything can happen. And it's unfortunate either way. If officer sees you as a threat, and that's happened to many people from many different backgrounds, people like myself, people like yourself, people have died trying to do the right thing.
Oh yeah.
And having done the right thing, people end up still seriously injured or fatally wounded. And so that's that on that. I know we're going on, and Sean, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to touch on that subject. I know it's a little bit dicey and you don't want to say the wrong thing. But I think you needled the thread excellently.
Thank you.
Thread
Pew Pew Tactical is, it's not a law enforcement centric organization. They were very generous to offer me a position coming on. I had written for them for several years, but their patent position is open to everybody. They want to be a resource to everybody. So, any law enforcement related stuff, that's all on me.
Right. And just reiterate again, and I'll probably need to mention this. You're representing yourself in this part of the conversation. Yeah. So definitely, Sean, I appreciate you talking a little bit about your personal background in law enforcement and just some of your thoughts on the recent stuff. Definitely appreciate that. And was there anything else we needed to touch on before we get out of here?
I think we're good, man. We got the little bit of background. We talked about the Pew Pew meter that's coming up. Like I said, I hope that we're going to have that ready in September. Keep in touch with the website. You can get us on pewpewtactical.com, and we'll definitely have more information heading out on all of our socials when we finally do launch. But I think the biggest thing is we haven't landed on exactly what we're going to do, but we've got some ideas for some incentives. We realize that, not everyone's going to want to come in and just, let me sign up, let me create yet another account and have to keep track of username and password, and then come in and give us ratings, rate these guns, tell us what your experiences have been. We're going to incentivize it. We're going to have probably giveaways or something of that nature. And I think you'll probably see some cool ideas come out of that. With the amount of stuff that we get on a regular basis for review, we've got a treasure trove, man. We can probably hook it up.
Hey, you know what? I mean, I love to see innovation in the industry. We look at companies like SIG and whatnot, and they're like, okay, so SIG, Pew Pew Tactical, innovating in the space. I see y'all leading the way.
Thanks, man.
So, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And how can people find both Pew Pew Tactical, and do you have any way that people can follow you and your journey?
Yeah, I send everybody to Pew Pew Tactical. We're definitely happy to have them come over to the website, pewpewtactical.com. You can find us on YouTube, same name, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, maybe a little bit. And then we've even experimented some on TikTok. It's kind of an interesting space for gun content.
Definitely an interesting space. I'm no longer there. I tried. But I'm not there any longer.
I hear you, man. The main thing in all of our social outreach, with YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all of that is to try to drive people back to the original content, because it's just easier for us to get full detailed reviews in a written format over on the website. So pewpewtactical.com.
Yeah, definitely. Having to contend with the way YouTube likes their videos and, it's the ups and downs. But Yes. So I'll link to the Pew Pew Tactical website, Instagram
Awesome.
page, YouTube, all down below. You guys definitely go check them out. They are freaking awesome
Thanks,
and a
man.
great resource for gun owners. And Sean, thank you so much for coming on and sharing both Pew Pew Tactical stuff and a little bit about your personal history and some of your thoughts on your previous profession. Thank you so much for that. And wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us. Check the links down below, channel partners, ways you can join us, shirts that you can buy, and of course, keep it costly.